purchase beautiful bouquets and graduation teddy bears for your special graduate. You can pre-order ahead of time and pick them up at our kiosk on graduation day. Visit thecommencementgroup.com/IUP.
Welcome back to the final episode of the Penn Sports Network for the year. I'm excited to get started. I'm Stephen Langdon Jr., joined by Jake Slobodnik and Jeff Hart. And guys, how are we feeling? Final episode of the year.
Oh, it's about time.
I'm feeling pretty good, Steven. It's been a long road, a lot of work put into this, a lot of people interviewed, and a lot of great steps made for TPSN. I'm really excited for what we got next year, too.
Yeah, we can only go up from here.
Exactly. We got a lot of big plans coming for next year, but to start out with this final episode, we're going to be doing a year in review of IUP sports. So, to start things off, we're going to start out with the football team. Didn't have, a season that many would expect from the football team, only going 8-3 on the season, missing playoffs altogether. And guys, how are we feeling about the season?
Well, I really think the season was – I think it was a big learning curve for them because they started out really hot, but watching them, they really choked against Slippery Rock and Cal U. They had a 2-game stint where Lenny Williams did not look like the same quarterback we had seen in the beginning part of the season. I think it was a confidence issue. You looked on their sideline. I didn't see the motivation and I didn't see players coming out of it. They looked down. They looked like they were in their own heads. But once they got past Cal U, they seemed to come back and look like the team we had seen. So I think they got in their own heads for a couple of games. So I really think that was the biggest reason why we did not make the playoffs. I don't think it was a talent issue. We were loaded with talent and coaching. Obviously, Tort and a bunch of those coaches do a great job. It's just a matter of I think it was more mental.
Well, I know one thing that Jeff always talked about was complacency among the team, and I really think once Lenny Williams broke the record, essentially claiming his throne as the best quarterback in IUP history, we saw him really get complacent with where they were, and they really didn't live up to potential. I think it was the Mercyhurst game in the Hall of Fame game where he really outshined everyone. But then we saw against Cal U and Slippery Rock, it didn't look like Lenny Williams. It looked like he was a new rookie on the team. He wasn't familiar with the territory.
He was overthrowing a lot too. I was going to say he was overthrowing.
And one thing I really want to bring back is in the Slippery Rock game, passing into triple coverage for the for the last play of the game. And with a veteran quarterback like Lenny Williams, you should know not to pass into triple coverage. Actually,
his junior season was incredible to say the least. And then, you started out his senior year, you're thinking, it can only go up from here because he was dominating defenses throughout the first 3-4 games.
He looked like his junior self.
Absolutely. And then all of a sudden, it's just the entire offense, I think, kind of fell apart.
Well, I think the one thing that remained consistent throughout the season, I want to give credit where credit's due, is the rushing game. The rushing game was incredibly consistent. That was the one thing you could not find any fault with. Justice did a great job. A bunch of those guys did a great job. I remember there were a couple games where there was over 200 yards rushing. It was really incredible to watch them because that was the one constant with the football team that you could expect. Defense had some inconsistencies, obviously, like we just talked about with the passing game, but the running game was always consistent.
And let's not forget that, was it Samir Bullock and Chris Temple were out for a good majority of the season, so Justice Evans really stepped up in his sophomore year. And let's also not leave out Tyler Balega, who, other than pretty much breaking his leg in that one game, was it California? No, it was against Gannon he hurt himself.
It was at Gannon that he tore his ACL before the game. But
he was making a good running back, too, in the absence of Bullock and Temple. He made a good backup for Evans. But Justice Evans...
Well, and I have to credit some of that to coaching because when you have multiple players that do a good job at the same position, you have to credit that to the system and the coaching that has been put in place for those players. And I'm not trying to say they were devoid of the talent necessary and the football IQ, but the coaches make it easier and enable those players to do well. And when you have multiple players at that position having success, you have to attribute the coaching to it.
Well, also the incredible offensive line, which stayed consistent throughout the majority of the season. When you have a dual threat quarterback like Lenny Williams, he was able to get out of the pocket, and if he needed to, he was able to scramble for several yards throughout the majority of the season. The one big thing about the season I take as a whole was when they started losing a lot of players to injuries. You mentioned two big names, Chris Temple and Samir Bullock. I think when Samir Bullock went out, that's when stuff kind of, really went on a decline.
Yeah, it was up in the air with not only fans but the team itself saying, what direction are we going to go in now that our leading rushing back is gone?
But going into this next season, they have great talent once again. Didn't really lose a whole ton. We were going to be losing Lenny Williams, of course, but we got Javon Davis. We also got a couple transfers that are coming in. But we got Justice Evans, big name. he should be the main person for that offense coming into next season.
If not him, then we have Don McNeil still on the receiving game, which is good.
But overall, that defense is also looking strong coming back. They got, of course, J.R. Stevens coming back for his senior year. He could be really an NFL talent from what I've seen. Entered last season as preseason All-American. And this season, I expect the same thing for him. And that really just great defense.
Let's also not forget Kayshaw Carter's returning. I know he's more of an offensive. He transitioned more to an offensive guy, but he started off the year as the PSAC's best kick returner.
One of the best in the nation.
Always, we saw in the first game that we commentated for IUP TV Sports. Wasn't it the first kickoff return of the season at home? He rushed it back for, I think, 83 yards?
It was the first play of the season for the IUP team. On the ensuing kickoff, they had a penalty, so they brought him back 5 yards, and then all of a sudden you see Kayshaw Carter, this little, freshman on the field, and he just sprints right down the field, scores a touchdown, and he worked his way up through depth chart to be really a starter on that offense as well.
Well, when talking about next year and the prospect of a new season, I think one of the big things for IUP, has to be Justice Evans coming back. He was stellar as a sophomore this season. And one of the key components when you're breaking in a new quarterback, which is going to be the situation for IUP next year, obviously, is being able to give them a consistent running game and a consistent defense. That way you're not asking a new quarterback to put up, 20, 30 points every single game. If you have a reliable defense that you can count on and a rushing game that allows you to spread the ball. People forget, if you're one-dimensional and they know you don't have a running game and you're just going to be passing every single play, they're just gonna blitz you almost every single play and try to give pressure on you and give you bad reads and looks. But if you can spread the field and not know what you're going to do and leave that question mark for the defense on how to best attack your offense, I think that plays a huge role. And especially with the progression of Justice Evans, if he takes a step forward, even a little step forward, he is going to be elite next year.
Well, and they are going to have a little bit of a change on the offense. You mentioned quarterback, but Javon Davis, if he does become the starter, not exactly like Lenny Williams. Javon Davis is more of a balanced quarterback. He can run the ball every once in a while, but he can really throw the ball very well. If he can work on his downfield throwing, I think he can be a dangerous weapon for this team in the years to come.
I agree, and I think it was that new transfer quarterback that we got from Toledo that could really play a key part in this offensive scheme next year, because we saw, I think it was with Shippensburg, how they utilized 2 quarterbacks each offensive drive.
Sometimes they would use 3 quarterbacks even on an offensive drive.
Even still, you can use multiple quarterbacks. You have one who can pass, one who can rush, and if God willing, you have one that can do both. So it's more of a wild card whenever you bring him out on the field. So if anything, it's actually going to benefit IUP more now that they have this transfer from Toledo, who I can't remember the name at the time, so I apologize. But if you have him and Javon Davis, it's going to look really good for their quarterback scheme.
And, I have to concur with that, because that sort of scheme and system with, multiple quarterbacks is being implemented more and more in the NFL. The Ravens just released that they're going to try to use Will Grier and RG3 as second and third options for, Lamar Jackson to kind of confuse everybody, have designated quarterbacks for specific things. Or we saw it with the Saints last year with Drew Brees and Taysom Hill. Guys, you can just throw it and just kind of throw off defenses. It's starting to have moderate success in the NFL. At the collegiate level, I feel like it will be even more successful, because obviously you have the gap between talent, so obviously not everyone's going to be playing at an elite talent level, so it might make it easier for them to exploit those sort of schemes. So I would really love to see that sort of look for them next year.
And branching off that, we noticed that IUP is a platoon sort of team. We saw it with the running back. You said they were running back by committee. Now they have a quarterback by committee, and I think now that with the injury of Don McNeil last year and JoJo Gauze, we're now a wide receiver by committee too, so who knows what we could pull. So I think we could be the biggest mystery team in the PSAC for a good way, not a bad way.
And I mean, the one thing about our schedule, looking at it for the coming year, is that it's not terrible. I mean, we do play the lower rated teams in the PSAC. Last year we did play a lot of good teams, and we were traveling an awful lot. We traveled to Erie several times throughout the year, but this year we're staying a little bit more at home.
I don't agree with that, just because I counted earlier. We have 5 home games, we have 6 away games. But those home games, we are playing a lot of the easier schools like Lock Haven, Gannon, Edinburgh, which we easily handled last year. Our biggest challenge, though, is going to be Cal U whenever they come here.
But as far as Erie goes, Jeff, just for first-hand experience, that the weather up there was brutal. And
the weather's different, and it's also people underestimate how much travel can play a role into a team. When you're on a bus for 3-4 hours, you get stiff, you're not loose, you're not ready for the game. That takes a toll on you as a team. And yes, it's only 3 hours still. That does play a role when you're in a away team. It plays a role. And like Steven said, the weather, I kid you not. I grew up in Erie for 16 years. It has snowed in May. It just snowed a couple days ago. The weather is horrible. There was 5 feet of snow on Christmas 2 years ago. So weather is a huge role. It rains and snows all the time.
Yeah, only time will tell.
Which takes away your passing game.
Only time will tell with this football team.
I mean, we do play New Haven at home
Yeah,
the first week.
Yeah, New Haven. It's just they're an average team that are coming into this season, but only time will tell with this football team. We're going to be covering them an awful lot next year. Big things are expected out of them, especially after a kind of a down year. But moving on to the winter sports, we got basketball. They had, both teams, incredible. Absolutely incredible. We'll start with the women's, who went to the semifinals once again 2 years in a row. So probably another banner will be hung up at the KCAC this season. But guys, what are your initial thoughts?
Well, I mean, we heard it here from Carolyn Appleby. She had high hopes from the women's team going forward into the playoff season, but I don't think it's hard to when history repeats itself, especially when you make it to the Final Four of the national tournament. That's hard to do, let alone advance or at least get to the national tournament. So I was impressed. The only bad thing is that we're losing seniors that really played a key contribution. But I think, and we covered this going through the entire year while covering this team, they have the bench depth to go farther just because we see people like Courtney Alexander who replicate Carolyn Appleby she pretty much mirrored her game style after her, and it showed in that national tournament. Courtney Alexander proved to be one of the key factors for those games. So.
Well, also, we got Mara Deanna coming back from injury. She was injured for a great amount of the season, but she was very key. And the first time that they went to the Final Four, coming on as a six-man. But
I know she was a sophomore at that time, wasn't she?
She was only a sophomore at the time, so big things expected out of her as well. But, Jeff.
You know, when talking about the women's basketball team, there's one thing that's still eating at me, and it really does. And that's just the thought that if Carolyn Appleby had not gotten hurt, they might have advanced. I know I'm not going to be one of those guys because it's easy to look in retrospect and say, "Oh, if this hadn't happened, we would have won the game." I genuinely think in that Elite 8 run, had Appleby not gone out so early and come back with an injury, yes, she came back, but she also wasn't playing the same. She looked stiff. She looked injured. Naturally so. It was a leg injury, so naturally she wasn't moving the same. I feel like when your leader, your absolute leader, whether it be scoring, actual like leadership of the players, like qualities, or just her play calling, like her playmaking ability. Carolyn Appleby is such a key player, and if she's not at 100%, your team's going to take a step back, even with all the bench depth we talk about. But especially when you're at the Elite 8 part of the tournament, that is where the talent there, those are usually some of the best teams in college basketball. When you are in the national tournament, those are the best of the best. So when you're not at your best, you're likely going to lose the game because everyone there is playing at an elite level. It's not like the opening couple of rounds where the talent divide is much bigger. The number 1 seeds are obviously much better than like the 8 seeds or even the lower seeds, stuff like that. I'm trying to get that's just one thing that has eaten at me ever since that, because I can't help but think, maybe Carolyn Appleby puts up 10 more points. Completely different game.
Absolutely. But words can't even describe the women's team throughout the majority of the year. They look dominant in all ways, shapes, or forms. Being number 1 for the first time in school history at one point as well.
And when you think of a good team, you have to think of a good leader, and that's Coach McConnell, now becoming one of the most winningest coach in women's basketball history. This entire title or championship run could not have happened without Coach McConnell. If you think about it, yeah, you have great players, but if you don't have a significant head to prove or to lead the way and pretty much pave the way for that success, you're not going anywhere. I hate to say it, but if without a good coach, and look at the NFL, you have Bill Belichick. He's hated, which is contrary to how people feel about Coach McConnell. He's a well-respected guy. But he's a great coach. He has a great mindset when it comes to the game. He's familiar with it, and it proves as he's a big title winner. And Coach McConnell, I think, is the same way.
When talking about this season, I really am proud of the women's basketball team because of the adversity they had to overcome. Because one thing that's really underappreciated in sports, I think, is the mental aspect. I've talked about that on a couple other podcasts. The mental aspect, that's such a big part of sports because you've conditioned your body for years. You know the system. You've been in practice almost every single day, practicing, putting your heart and soul out there. So it gets to the point where physically almost everyone's at the same level. It just depends on mentally who has the mental fortitude to carry through with it. And the women going through that mental block we saw at the end of the year with Seton Hill, that they lost that last game against them on senior night and then had to face them immediately after, but then beat them. That was a big deal. And then I think the biggest moment of triumph and victory for this women's team was when they beat Cal U. That was the biggest thing for me, when they actually managed to beat the team that had given them so many problems in the regular part of the season.
They lost to them twice before beating them.
The one team that could...
The one game that mattered the most, they came out and they beat Cal U, and wow.
And that says miles about who they are as a team. While, yeah, they might have lost a couple of games, they realize that those games are meaningless when you look in the big picture, and when they needed it most, they got the production and had the mental fortitude to beat the team that had basically dominated them in the beginning part of the season. It seemed mentally like they just weren't ready for Cal U because they had played a very similar style of basketball. But it's very vindicating to watch them play like that, especially when we were calling the games at various points of the year, all three of us at different parts of the year. It was very nice to watch them put it together and come together as a group after facing that adversity, I guess.
I just got to give them credit because, you talk about the strength and the mental fortitude that they had. Coming into the season, they had a big target on their back just because of the success they had last year. And that does not make anything easier. I have to say that right now. The big target on your back coming into the season, everyone is after your head.
No, they were rated in the top 10 for, I think, the entire season as well. Nationally, not even, regional or anything like that. You're nationally ranked, and you were looked upon every single week to do something great. And, they scored 100 points several times throughout the year as well. And for a team to go out there, they had a great offense. At times, their defense struggled, I will say so. But overall, you really can't say that they had a bad season because making it to the Final Four is no easy task, of course. They lost at that stage. But as far as the next couple years, only time will tell. Once again, another team that's going to be looking to rebuild a lot of their prospects. Natalie Myers is coming back. She's going to be, the
captain. I consider her and Mara Deanna the captains of the team right now. And I honestly have a strong prediction. I think they're going to make another national title run just because of the consistency that they had this year, especially utilizing the underclassmen. There's no way that they could fail next year just because of how talented their staff actually is.
There's a big part of me that wants to agree with you, Jake, but I actually disagree. I think the women's basketball team will have success next year because, obviously you have a great coach, Coach McConnell. Nothing else needs to be said about the success he has had on the court and off the court, to be quite honest, just as a human being. Great guy. Couldn't ask for a better person leading your team. And also, they do have a decent bench. While we want to credit the bench and give them the credence that they're due, I do agree they did do a lot this season. You're losing a lot of great players. You're losing Carolyn Appleby, who arguably is one of the best in Division II. You have Brittany Robinson, who was your post threat, who would just get rebounds left and right and just destroy people in the post. You had Anna Holland, who was a six woman in this case, who really came off the bench and just could score. There was a night she didn't even miss a single shot. So really, I think and Lauren Wallasick, who at the beginning of the season looked just as unstoppable as Appleby on the fast break. Those two had chemistry that was unstoppable. But you're losing three of your primary scorers and playmakers, and there aren't a lot of players, especially like Carolyn Appleby out there, and especially on that team. I didn't see anyone off the bench who really made me go, wow, that is someone who's going to be your primary ball handler, ball scorer. And I'm not saying someone could emerge, someone could take a big step up. That could obviously happen, but they might be a team that relies more on their teamwork and system next year, because this team heavily relied on their primary ball handlers rather than an entire team effort. And while the whole team played a role, even in the nights Carolyn Appleby didn't absolutely go off, she still would get like 15, 20 points. Even in the nights she didn't absolutely go off. She'd still get assists, she'd get steals. I mean, she led the team in steals. So when you're losing that amount of talent, I can't imagine them being where they are this year, but I hope they do.
Well, they did have a great balance between seniors and freshmen, had 4 freshmen on the bench this season. So we'll have to see how they do next winter. And, of course, we'll be broadcasting some of the games as the season comes up as well. But going over to the men's side, the men's, another team that had a pretty solid year. Guys, what are your thoughts on the men's team?
Well, the men's team, I really was proud of the way they looked later in the season. They, unlike the women's, they looked stronger as the season went on, whereas the women's, they seemed to wane as the season went on and then turned it back on during the tournament, obviously. But the men's team at the beginning of the season, rebounding was a huge issue. I especially got on that team for rebounding because guys like Brunwick, it seemed like Brunwick could not rebound. I was growingly frustrated with the team because we had so much size. We had 4 players that were taller than 6'9", and we could barely rebound. We were getting Westchester out rebounded us 2-1 almost every time we played them. And I was like, okay, we have all this size. Why are we rebounding? And also, we relied so much on Kobo at the beginning of the season, and I felt like this growing reliance on him. But as the season progressed, we really saw guys step up. Dante really turned it on later, and especially in the tournament, had a 33-point game, absolutely went off. I mean, you had Malik Miller, who arguably was probably the best offensive player on the team, in my opinion. Maybe not the most consistent, but when he was feeling it, he was feeling it. And they really seemed to pull together. You had Chucky Humphreys, who became the emotional leader for that team. I really believe so, because every time they would be primed for a run, he would have some big dunk or rejection that would get the team going. So I was really proud, and it was nice to see the team really come together as the season went on, because at the beginning of the year, and I had even talked to people who had watched them, including, family members, friends, other students who would watch the team, they noticed that it was always, give Kobo the ball, he'll drive the lane, get a mid-range game going, maybe give it back out to Dante and shoot a 3. Whereas later in the season, we saw system changes where we instituted, Kovacevic for a part of the game and saw him increasingly grow his role, and we found a healthy balance between our big men, Brunwick for defensive scenarios, Kovacevic for offensive scenarios. So really I was proud of how the team matured and grew together, because it was a complete 180-degree turn from beginning and end of season, and that was very awesome to see compared to the women's team, who started off so strong and looked like not a single person in Division II could beat them, whereas at the end of the season they looked a little more vulnerable.
I agree with that, and I think Jeff hit the nail on the head on most of the things. I'm glad they were able to transition toward the end of the year, especially when they found Kovacevic was a good defensive guy. And going back to Brunwick, it looked like his hands kind of turned to stone, because it looked like he couldn't rebound anything. It always looked like it was a hot potato or something, just always falling out of his hands. And then they'd also have a very predictable game scheme. Get it low to Kobo, or dish it out for Dante for 3, if not Malik. But Malik kind of fell off toward the end of the season. So I think their game plan kind of became really predictable, and I think that's what led to their ultimate demise in the playoffs, which they lost to Mercyhurst. Which, let me just say right now, they are not a team to sleep on. Mercyhurst is not a team to sleep on at all, but they have been your Achilles heel all year. And let's put it side by side. IUP women's basketball team was able to overcome their Achilles heel in Cal U, but then Mercyhurst, there was always a toss-up between that. I don't know. It just didn't seem like they were comfortable at all with anything.
Well, the thing when I go back and watch those Mercyhurst games, the thing that really bothered me was they went back to playing like how they did at the beginning of the season. The problem was, and this is my personal thought, doesn't make it right. Anyone who wants to contest me on this, feel free. I really thought those last few games, they started to go back to what they used to do, and we had a growing reliance on Dante and Kobo. He was the problem.
We relied so much upon him those last few games
because
we just got used to it.
Well, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Every game, it seemed like every game was some record-breaking game by Dante. There was the one game where he made 7 threes, and he was having these great games in the postseason, and people were like, "Great." Well, what happens when he doesn't have one? They started going to Kobo again, and Jason Massey shut down Kobo. Kobo only had 4 points when he was guarded by Jason Massey. He did not allow him anything. And it frustrated me when I was watching that last Mercyhurst game, and I will say this. I'm not a coach. I'm not saying I know more than Coach Lombardi, who is a basketball guru. He knows what he's talking about. He knows what he's doing. Very successful coach. Glad he's our coach. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to cast any aspersions on Coach Lombardi. He's an excellent coach, and I would not want anyone else leading the team. But why in the world would you keep Kobo on Massey for the almost entirety of the game when Kobo got nullified and shut down? But when you put Humphreys on Massey, he had a couple blocks against him. Massey couldn't get around him because Humphreys was more athletic and lankier than Kobo and was willing to go more and get more physical with him. Kobo's not a physical player. Kobo's a style player. He is very much a technique player. He's more, it's like Tim Duncan. He's a fundamental player. Really good at his fundamentals, knows how to score, knows he has an unstoppable post shot, all that thing. But defensively, Chucky, I think, is better than Kobo. And Chucky showed that against Massey because when he was playing against Massey, he wasn't scoring as much. But when Massey was playing against Kobo, he was scoring at will.
I did love seeing that kind of rivalry grow throughout the periods of the year, though. Mercyhurst was just, they were one of those teams that they didn't play. It was one of those things that they didn't score a lot of points, but they made it work. You know, one of the best defensive teams in the country
Best
this
defense
season.
best defense in the PSAC.
Yeah, and one of the, I think, top 3 in the nation for defense as well. But we saw them, even when they were here for the regionals, that they were shutting down the biggest teams in the country as far as offense goes. And it was incredible to watch. And they had a great journey. Both teams, you know, not just Mercyhurst, IUP, both of them just duking it out. It was like a gladiator battle right up until the end. But, you know, just great stuff happening there. And IUP is going to be getting a new point guard next year as well. They got David Morris. He's going to be transferring for Tennessee State. So they got an easy replacement from Lombardi. I just read a quick article on David Morris, and he can shoot the 3-ball as well. So he's a 2,000-point scorer in high school, and then went D1, and now he's going to be going to IUP.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Don't Humphreys and Morris have a connection between each other? I saw somewhere that it was either him or Foster had a connection with Morris.
I think it was Foster, because Foster and Morris, I think, went to high schools that are very close to each other.
So
if
they
not the
know
same high school.
They know each other, and I think they have a very positive relationship with each other. So now they're on the same team. The connection's going to be a lot bigger.
Well, the one thing about Armoni Foster, too, is that I noticed that, I don't know if he had shin splints or what, but every time they went to the bench throughout, towards the end of the season, he would have to put, I believe, ice packs or a heat pad on his shins. So I'm not sure if there was a shin splints injury, but maybe that factored into his play towards the end.
Yeah, I think I saw that too.
So when talking about, we talked about the future for women's. For men's, I think we're going to see a complete 180-degree change next year.
For the better or worse?
It depends. I don't know. But what I'm trying to say is stylistically, it's going to be the complete opposite. This year was the year of the bigs. We had a lot of big players, like just massive in size. You had Brunwick, you had Kovacevic, you had Kobo.
Those 3 players over 6'8".
Yeah, it was crazy. You had size. And even you had guys like Malik or Humphreys who, while maybe not big and muscular, they're tall. They're lanky. Like Malik is especially tall for a guard.
Yeah, Malik is around, 6'5",
yeah,
6'6".
Something to that effect. Malik is definitely not a small guy at all. Next year, I have a very strong feeling we're going to be a small ball 3-point shooting team because
it seems as though that's how they're stacking up their team.
If you look at it, you have Morris, who's going to be comparable to a Lombardi, at least style-wise play. You're going to have Malik Miller as your shooting guard or small forward. I don't know how they're going to do it. I think they're going to have Malik as their small, and they're going to have Armoni as their shooting guard. And then for your power forward, you're going to have Chucky. And I'm not sure what they're going to do as center yet, but if your power forward's Chucky Humphreys, that is way different than this year where you had Kobo Diaz, who is way bigger and just a different type of player than Chucky. Chucky Humphreys was more of a physicality powerhouse, whereas Kobo was just the model of consistency offensive player. Chucky's
Kobo's one of those players that he's more of a mid-range shooter. Chucky plays a lot more inside the paint.
Well, and he's a more defensive-oriented player. Like
Absolutely.
I think Chucky Humphreys actually reminds me a lot of a Jimmy Butler type player. They model their game on their defense, and he can develop into an offensive presence. I don't know if he will. He's decent offensively. He'll give you 7 to 11 points consistently a game. But if maybe he can turn it up and score 15 to 19 a game and be elite, that would be awesome. But
because Chucky, he's one of those players I think that can develop a jump shot at some point in the next 2 years, but his average will probably stay around
15,
16 points.
Something, nothing crazy, but just a model of consistency for the team.
No, but he's going to be one of those players that's going to be able to get a lot of blocks. He's going to probably replace Brunwick as far as blocks go for the team, and he's going to be able to. He's going to be that big motivator for the team, like you said earlier. He loves to dunk the ball, and he loves to get his bench going, and he loves to get the fans going as well.
And I'll be curious to see who they put in at center, because if they put in another smaller player, it's going to be a complete small ball lineup. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to find recruit a really big guy just to clog up the lane in case, because small ball can work, but if you go up against a team that has big men like ours, it matches up perfectly for them because all they have to do is just beat you up in the post. So it really depends. It really depends on how skilled your 3-point shooting is too. Because if we're a consistent 3-point shooting team, small ball will work.
If we can get someone like East Stroudsburg has in Smith, he's tall, he's 6'10", and he's able to just collect rebounds, because that's really what they need at this point. They need someone to collect the rebounds and being able to dish it out to the corner and shoot the three.
See, if we're talking big men that you want, oh my gosh, I'd want Patrick Smith.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Patrick Smith. Dude, he had 5 blocks in one game. He was going off in the Atlantic Regionals. He looked unstoppable because not only could he beat you up inside because he was just physically strong, he could shoot the three. That was the craziest part. He was a big guy who could shoot the three. Could you imagine how much he would improve a player like him would improve a team? A big man who's strong, can back you down, go in the post, and by the way, he can also shoot the three proficiently. On a small ball team, that would be a very welcomed addition.
Absolutely. But moving away from the basketball team and moving on to the spring sports, we're going to be talking a little bit about the baseball team. Jake, I know you've been following them all season long. Their season is done at this point.
Dude, it was over after 2 weeks into the season. And don't get me wrong, I respect Coach Rabiansky and I respect the team. But I don't know how many of us were thinking that this would be a better year this year for the baseball team. They're finishing with a 15-26 record, 11 games under 500. And a lot of that attributes to the pitching. Granted, I'll give credit where credit is due. Colin Klaus came around toward the end of the season, and he brought in some wins. There's nothing else I could say about that. But it's that late season mentality when you're already knocked out of a playoff race. Why? That's the biggest question.
I think the one takeaway from the baseball team is that they were never able to put a complete game together. Whether it be pitching would be great one game, hitters couldn't hit the game.
Their batting wasn't terrible. That's the thing.
Their hitting was incredible. It was mostly the hitting that did well throughout the majority of the season.
Yeah.
But then those games, it seems as though the pitching just kind of fell off.
Well, to put it in perspective, Jeff Allen, who is supposed to be the ace and leader of the team, finished with an almost 4 ERA and a 4-4 record in 9 games started. This was the same kid who brought a no-hitter within his first few starts, and then he fell off the face of the earth toward the end of the season.
Yeah, I think at one point had a 2 ERA.
He had something sub-2. He was way better than that. But then, I have to give credit where credit's due again. Tyler Adams came around. I think he picked up 3 of the last 5 wins for the Crimson Hawks. He came in, and he's a southpaw. You know how hitters feel when they see a southpaw on the mound. They tend to, tremble a little bit. But he did well. He finished with an above 500 record. The only IUP pitcher to finish above 500. Believe that one or not. But the thing is that you said it best. Our hitting did well, but our pitching couldn't back it up. Nick DeAndres, a freshman, was hitting a 364 average in 27 games started, 31 played. As a freshman, that is astounding. And I think that's why Nick DeAndres is going to become a natural-born leader of the team. And Matt Schwartz, our big power hitter, lived up to the expectations. 8 home runs, 331 average.
From Mercyhurst.
Yeah, and he did well for us. I'm not complaining there. Ben Teplin, Nick Hess did well as well. Chris Eisel, under 300, but 291, which is solid. I think, it maintained consistency, whereas 6 of the starters of the 9 in the lineup hit above 250. That is pretty good.
Solid.
That is solid from a team. But if you don't have the pitching to back it up, and I think this is where going over the summer, they're going to start recruiting more pitchers just because of this poor pitching, pitching performance from the entire rotation and bullpen as well. I mean, I've talked to a lot of, and the thing is that confidence isn't really an issue at all. I've talked to some of the players, for example, Colin Klaus. I've even talked to Mike Klainsmith and Matt Schwartz. They had the highest confidence. It's just when you go into a game, and here's the thing with IUP is that, and I know I go all over the place, but they were able to start games, go up maybe by 5, but then they would surrender the lead in the late goings of the game. They can start a game, they just can't finish it, whether it's the starter on the hill or their bullpen. They're not reliable pitching, and I'm sorry to say it, and trust me, I love writing for the team, but as a baseball analyst, you need to find better pitching. Baseball is a 2-sided game. It comes down to hitting and pitching. If one is working, You can't rely on that only. You need to have both sides coming together and pitching good. Even if you just develop the talent you have, you need to watch the film that's accessible. And I say that because not many people were putting on live streams. But you need to really analyze what went wrong for your team. You need to work on the bullpen. You need to work on the rotation. That's all I got to say. And you can't just have two defined pitchers that are starters in Klaus and Allen. I'm sorry.
Their one defining moment this year was beating Mercyhurst at Mercyhurst, though. Beating a nationally ranked team. Fantastic job by them. And I think as far as the baseball team goes, I think they'll get a lot better next year.
I hope.
Hopefully, because they are still a very young team. And as far as everything goes, maybe they'll do their homework, focus on a couple of things as, the following months come on.
I would hope so. I mean, we had high hopes coming in for this season, but next year I really hope that they turn out a lot better than this year.
Yeah, but...
One of the spring sports that I wanted to kind of bring attention to was the women's lacrosse team. They just had their game against Seton Hill, where they did lose in the PSAC playoffs, 14-16. Close game. They had actually just beaten Seton Hill 14-13 in overtime on Wednesday. So it was a close game even in that one. So Seton Hill is definitely a impressive team. But I want to give credit to the women's lacrosse team. They won 7 games in a row.
We're a team that not many people had on their radar.
Not many people
Finish
knew
with a
about.
record. Finish with a record of 10-7. Given, when you look at that, you're like, oh, it's just 10-7. But you also have to realize 7 straight wins. 7.
And they were sizable wins.
That's impressive. And they got scoring from just about everyone. The lacrosse team was just really consistent offensively and just really did a great job to me. And I just highlighting how they pulled together, because at the beginning of the season, they were kind of a 500 team. The first 4 or 5 games, it was like win one, lose one, win one, lose one. Then they just put it together, got primed for a run, and just went off. And even though they did lose in the PSAC playoffs, it's understandable when it's against Seton Hill, which is the team they struggled with last time they played, and it had to go in overtime. So credit to them, especially when IUP spring sports are not really considered to be as prolific as their fall and winter sports. Really credit to them for making it to the playoffs and being able to do a good job. Because even though they did lose in the playoffs, it was only 14-16, so it's not like they got absolutely blown out of the water by any means. So credit to the women's lacrosse team. They really did a great job this year.
Yeah, especially someone like Allie Burrows, who will be graduating this coming month. But incredible season by her. Had 7 goals in one game, 6 goals in one game as well. So
really the workhorse for the squad.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. Scored a heck of a lot of goals. Over 40 on the season. So incredible job by her. And as far as the lacrosse team, I want to see what they can do next year coming in. Of course, like I said, Allie Burrow's leaving, so their big scorer is going to be gone. So who's going to be replacing her? Time will tell. Time will tell as far as this team goes. But as we close out, I want to get your guys' top 3 moments of the season each. So who wants to start first? Your top 3 IUP sports moments of the year.
Woof. That's hard.
Yeah,
That's
there
really
were so many
hard.
good moments that happened this year.
I know one of them. Well, let me just try per sport. Football, I have to go with that 50-yard, that amazing catch down the field. I forget which game it was. You guys even have the replay of it. That amazing throw by Lenny Williams.
It was Lenny Williams to Justice Evans.
About to say Evans, I remember, just went up over a guy. It was featured on ESPN's Top 10, I believe, as well. It was just a spectacular play. I think one of my biggest moments for men's basketball, even though it did not ultimately end in the win, I think Malik Miller's shot that gave them the lead with 10 seconds left was pretty big, and that kind of solidified to me why Malik Miller is such a clutch player and a great offensive talent. For the women's team, beating Cal U, I mean, I don't think that's a question for anybody. Beating Cal U was such a monumental moment for them. So I have to go with those 3 because just obviously they were the 3 most successful programs in IUP this year. We covered them the most because you guys commentated football, I commentated basketball with you two. It was really spectacular to watch all those teams, and I think those moments were just some of the best for me.
Yeah, looking back upon it, we did do a lot of sports this year.
Yeah.
As well as Jake and I, we did some baseball and softball. And as far as next year goes, we're going to be doing a lot more sports as well. We're going to be picking up some soccer.
All of us doing volleyball together.
Yep,
Volleyball, lacrosse.
Volleyball, lacrosse. So, but Jake, your top 3 moments of the year. I know this is probably the hardest question I've ever had to answer.
But I will say I'm glad we're answering it, though. I like Jeff's picks. I think I'm going to do the same format as him. My favorite football memory, the Seton Hill victory at home. Because it just brought out there was the strength again from the IUP team, walloping on them 56-14. It was a stat patter, if you ask me. We saw Javon Davis come in for a few quarters. He showed what we're going to see next year. Pretty much expect what to see, as he takes over the starting role. And it was the Veterans Day game, put on a show for the vets. That, and I'm just going to clear the air right now. Jack Benedict called it too. So it's always a good day when Benedict's in the office. My favorite memory for the men's basketball team, the PSAC championship against Mercyhurst. Just because Mercyhurst had their Achilles heel throughout the year. Everyone thought Mercyhurst was just going to come in and once again win, but IUP, they capitalized on, what was it? Was it Massey being out, or was it?
No, it was
Micah Till.
Micah Till was Slippery Rock. That was a big thing for them, taking
right.
Micah Tills with the Slippery Rock game. That was a big one because Tills had gotten back spasms and went out with the game early.
But that PSAC championship, like I mentioned earlier, everyone thought Massey and Smith were going to come in and thought they were going to control the team. But IUP, they somehow came back and won a PSAC title game to match the women's basketball team. I think it was the first time in how long? 1983 that we've seen both the men and the women's team combined win a PSAC title. That I don't think will ever.
Incredible.
And the fact that we all got to witness it, even better. My spring moment. Granted, the softball team wasn't the best, but Lauren Zola's no. Just because it was the first softball game that Steven and I called, we witnessed history in our first game. I didn't know how to call a home run, and I didn't know how to call a no-hitter. But still, congratulations to Lauren Zola. Granted, they played Clarion, which put a big old goose egg in the win column all season, but it's not every day that you get to see a no-hitter, let alone call it over the radio. So those are my top 3 moments. Seton Hill victory, men's championship, and Lauren Zola's no.
Yeah, so my top 3, I'm going to start out with number 3, Lauren Zola. Of course, that big no. It was very exciting. Jake touched upon every single moment very well, especially Beers. 2 home runs in that game as well. Dead center field, but just incredible game to witness. First no-hitter I've ever seen live. So one of those things I'll always remember. Number 2, I'm going to go with the entire Slippery Rock game. Of course, it was homecoming, and we had that big long rain delay. It lasted, I think, an hour and a half. So, Jake and I were at the stadium all day. So it's one of those things that you'll
No
never
different
forget.
than any other time.
But I remember telling Jake that as soon as the rain delay happened, that IUP was down by a lot. They were down by at least 3 touchdowns at the time. I think it was 28-7 at that point. And I said, this is probably going to be the best thing that's happened to IUP all season long is that rain delay. And they came out there. They played strong. Unfortunately, could not get the job done, but just an incredible day altogether, especially on homecoming, seeing, just everything happen on that day. And then number 1, IUP basketball winning the PSAC championship. Just being able to witness that. I remember sitting down. I was doing sideline reporting for the game, and just incredible scenes just from being down on the court.
Yeah, I was going to say, you got to interview people after the game. You got to...
Yeah, got to talk with both Dante and Coach Lombardi after the game.
We got juked for a piece of the net.
Yeah.
Oh, that should have been one of our favorite memories.
Oh, gosh. I felt,
man.
dude, that was so embarrassing for us. To any of the viewers who don't know, actually, I don't even think anyone knows this. We never told anybody. All 3 of us were down on the court trying to get a picture with Kobo for the TPSN Twitter.
Yeah,
and one of the...
Which you should be following, by the way.
Yes.
It was about a week before we were about to interview Kobo.
Yeah, so we were naturally just trying to get some, media attention for TPSN. And one of the...
I think it was Coach Payne.
It was one of the coaches, grabbed a piece of the net, walked towards the 3 of us, looking at us, held a piece of the net out right in front of us, like with 2 inches. And all 3 of us are looking there like,
Who takes it?
And we're all just trying to figure it out. And Jake puts his hand out and goes, I'll take it. He looks at us and goes, it's for my daughter. Little did we know there's like a little 5-year-old child standing right behind us. So we look like a bunch of you-know-what
We
sitting
look
there.
selfish.
We looked like we were trying to take a piece of the net for ourselves away from some kid, and that just wasn't even the case. We just thought he was, because we were even confused when he was handing it.
Bad. I felt so bad the rest of the
Yeah,
day.
because that's what wasn't the case. We weren't even trying to take it for ourselves.
No.
We just were confused. We're like, wait, why is he giving us the net?
Yeah.
Like, we were just like, I mean, we're not going to pass on it, but like, why is he giving it to us? And that just wasn't the case.
Yeah, but just being down there courtside the entire game, you can see Coach Lombardi. You know what it meant to him, and you know what it meant to the team. That was the first PSAC championship by that group of seniors as well, and it was just an incredible day altogether because the women's team was down in the first half against Kutztown, and then all of a sudden they just start storming back, and then as soon as they showed up on the board that the women's won, it really changed the momentum of the game because they showed that the women won. They had an announcement about it and everything, and then all of a sudden everyone, you saw it on the IUP players' faces that they knew that, it's going to look bad if we lose at home at this point. And it was just an incredible day altogether.
Not to mention we were able to watch ourselves on PCN. We can toot our own horn.
Yeah, but it's been a huge accomplishment, seeing where we started out at the beginning of the year to where we are now as far as the Penn Sports Network.
Didn't really know each other at the beginning of the year. I know Steve and I barely knew each other, but Jeff and I hadn't even met yet.
Who are you people?
Yeah, I remember our editor-in-chief, Seth Wilcock, he has me coming into his office. He's like, hey, so I had this great idea that, we should start our very own IUP, kind of like an IUP podcast. So this is exactly what we're doing now. And he came up with the idea. I'm like, wow, that sounds great, He's like, yeah, you and Jake can do it. I'm like, you know what? I might know a third person. I'm like, I bet Jeff Hart would really like to do it. And then I ran it by the guys. I'm like, man, I think this could be really something special.
We did start on a TV studio, but that's a story for another day.
Yeah, it's a long story.
Woof.
But, from where we started to where we are now, I really appreciate you guys joining me every step of the way.
I appreciate being on and having you.
Oh, Steven, you're getting a tear out of me right now. I'm going to cry a little bit here. I mean, obviously, for real, though, I appreciate that. It's been great working with all three of you all season long. I mean, because the viewers need to know this, too. This transcends just this podcast. We worked for hours for the basketball broadcast. We worked together on TV, newspaper, radio. So we did all this stuff together. So all of us have, the three of us just have a great chemistry, passion for sports, and this is pretty much our lives. This is what we do. The IUP sports and
it's
comm
so
media
bad.
program is what we do.
I mean, it's so bad that whenever I type in I on anything,
IUP Athletics is the first thing that
Athletics.
comes up every
IUP
single
Athletics.
time.
But it's not over, we're just taking
we-
a 3-month intermission, I guess.
Yeah, we still got another 2 more years of this.
The grind never stops, boys.
Absolutely. We still got 2 more years of this, until Jake and I have to move on. But,
I'll keep it going for another year after you two move on, and then I don't know who's going to take over after.
That's for time to tell. But it's been an honor working with you guys. And like I said, it's only going to get bigger from here. But that will pretty much end our show. Follow us on Twitter at TPSN.
At official_TPSN.
Yeah. Also, follow us on our YouTube. Subscribe. We always come out with videos every week, just about every week. And, so that will do it from Jeff Hart, Jake Slobotnik, and myself, Steven Langdon Jr. And stay healthy out there.
We'll see you in fall 2019.
Absolutely.
It's going to be a good one.